You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum.
Welcome back to Precinct 444. I'm your host, Josh Bronson. Today's conversation is one I've really been looking forward to. My guest today is a friend and colleague, former director of the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, and currently Senior Vice President of Health and Public Safety at Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, Karhlton Moore. Karhlton is someone who has helped shape national conversations around justice, safety, and systems change throughout his entire career. We'll start by reflecting on his time at BJA, what he's most proud of, and what lessons stand out as he steps away from federal service. Then we'll shift to what's next, his new role as Senior Vice President at Meadows, where innovative approaches at the intersection of mental health and public safety are redefining how communities respond to crisis. Karhlton, welcome back to Precinct 444.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's so wonderful to be here, and it's great to see you. And you told me to say it was great to see you. I would have said that even if you hadn't prompted me. I'm just kidding.
I do have a coin for you afterwards, just as payment for that. I appreciate that.
All right, good. Yeah. Good. That's great.
Well, I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're traveling and all that, and it's really good to see you again. And so first and foremost, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. How have you been? How's the family doing?
I'm good. I'm really good. The family is doing great. I actually had dinner last night with my daughter who lives here now. She's a first-year law student at Howard. And so she's doing, she's doing well. I'll say she's doing as well as a first-year law student can do, thinking back to law school. And then my son, Marcus, is a sophomore at the University of Cincinnati. He wants to be a high school teacher, a history teacher, which he knows the most random things. And every time I say that, if I say that around my wife, she will say, you know the most random things. So I guess he gets that a little bit from me. And of course, we are a baseball family.
Absolutely.
3 sons, all left-handed. Marcus doesn't play anymore, but Carson, he has a scrimmage today, so I'm going to try to get home in time to see a scrimmage. I missed it yesterday, but he's a senior in high school, so it's going to be weird him leaving next year. Our family just keeps getting smaller. I actually changed our group chat to Little Fam. That's the name of our group chat. It's just my wife, Carson, and then Cam, our youngest. He's an 8th grader, and so. I've probably talked to you about him over the years. Mm-hmm. He's calmed down a lot, and he needed to. He really needed to, but he has. So they're all doing well, and we're just gearing up for baseball season.
That's great. Yeah, it's an exciting time, and it's weird too because all of a sudden your family expands and all of this, and then all of a sudden they start contracting, and
yes.
So I'm in a similar situation. My oldest is graduating from Towson University this year, and she wants to be a teacher as well.
Oh, okay.
She's going into education.
It's awesome.
Mathematics though, and she definitely did not get that from me. So that's and then my youngest is graduating.
I saw you struggling counting the pages.
Yeah, I have to put numbers on them in order to know where I am. So no, that's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that everybody's doing well. That's really great.
Thank you.
And so moving into the meat of the conversation, I guess. Obviously you left BJA, with about a year or so ago, and so when you think back, you accomplished so much while you were there. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here, but having had the opportunity to work with you over the years while you were at BJA, I just saw this excitement that people had, the people that worked there, working on the different projects that were coming up. And I'm just wondering, when you think back on your time leading BJA, what are sort of the moments or themes that stand out to you most?
Oh, gosh. I think, just from the very beginning, there were so many. Let me start over. There's no onboarding process. Let me just start there. One day, it was a Friday. I was the executive director of the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services. That Monday, I was the director of the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And suddenly people are asking you all kinds of questions, and you know the least of anyone in the organization. Now, fortunately, I had worked with BJA a long time as an SAA and through my work with NCJA. And so I knew a lot about the organization, but there was so much that I needed to learn about the organization. Gosh, thinking back, I remember one of the things I wanted to do was meet with all the stakeholder organizations and just trying to come up with a schedule of how I could meet with everyone and also make sure that no one felt slighted by the order in which I met with people, which is something I didn't even really think about. It was like, oh, we'll meet with so-and-so. I was like, well, you really should meet with so-and-so. I'm like, okay, this is going to be challenging. It's going to be a challenging thing, but getting to know people, meeting leaders from across the country, getting to know throughout the entire criminal justice system. That's one of the things about BJA is it's for cops, but it's not just for cops. It's for prosecutors, but not just prosecutors. You know, you have all these organizations you want to meet with, you need to meet with. And the thing that I was really focused on when I was in Ohio, because really my training to be the BJA director came from my time in Ohio. And one of the things that I did in Ohio was I didn't spend my time just sitting in my office in Columbus, and I needed to get to know people and meet people. And so I was committed to that at BJA as well. Now, we had two things going on that I had to learn very quickly. One was I had to learn all about the National Law Enforcement Knowledge Lab because that kickoff was coming very soon. And then there was, for the first time, we were going to put out significant amounts of money around community violence intervention. And so, we needed to make sure that we were making the right types of investments there and that we all really understood the depths of community violence intervention and to make sure that because you're trying to make these decisions, well, you have to have a base of knowledge in order to determine what's the best investment for you to make. And so we needed to understand that. And so I just really dove into that. Kristen Mahoney was great because even before I got to BJA, she shared with me, hey, here's some things that are coming up. And so I was able to learn a lot about the Knowledge Lab and dig in with CB. I actually reached out to a colleague of mine, Akila Sherrills, and before I started, I hadn't really told a lot of people outside of my very small circle that I was coming to BJA. And so I had this meeting, and they told me it was him and and they said they had like a half an hour, and I ended up talking to them for like an hour or something like that. And so finally I told them, I said, look, I'm going to be named the BJA director very soon. They told me not to tell anyone. But that's why. And I said, I'll probably lean on you a little bit more as we go through this process, as I go through the onboarding process. So those were kind of the initial things. But the big thing was, if you go back to 2022, it was violent crime. Yeah. Violent crime was off the hook. And it started in 2020 with the pandemic and then other things that really caused a lot of the increases in violent crime. And then it just kept going. And so I remember my very first meeting with Perf, and Chuck asked me, he said, what are you most focused on? And I said, well, there's two things. there's officer safety and wellness, and we've got to drive violent crime down. And so we've got to figure out, how do we as an organization support practitioners across the country in their efforts to drive down violent crime.
And I think what's so interesting about that, especially that last part there, is that I think sometimes we tend to overlook the connection between the two, right? Where officer safety and wellness, if officers don't feel safe themselves, or they don't feel, mentally well, in a good space, they can't do their jobs as effectively at helping to drive down violent crime. So it's, I love the fact that those were the two sort of priorities, and it really showed. And I think, just being on the other side and receiving funds from BJA and, working on BJA projects during that time, I think those two, sort of themes really came through. So I want you to know that, and sort of heard that. And I feel like there were a lot of really positive changes made during that time. And, when you took over, there was a lot of scrutiny on the criminal justice system and law enforcement in particular. George Floyd wasn't, too far off, right? And things like that. So how did that shape your approach to leadership and decision-making, that sort of period of time in our nation's history, and coming off COVID, like you said, too?
Yeah. So, I kind of think about decision-making. It's almost like, there are some authors who they'll write the end of their book first, and then they'll go back and start writing the story. And I always think about, what does success look like to us? Success looked like violent crime going down. It looked like communities engaging more with police departments. And then it was kind of, okay, how do we get to that? Now, fortunately, there were already tools at BJA that were in place. And we had great partners, like IRR did a lot of the health, safety, and wellness work that we did. And IACP, actually the very first conference, and this was not an accident. The first conference I spoke at as the BJA director was the IACP Officer Safety and Wellness Symposium. That was in Atlanta. And I was there and gave a speech, probably the worst speech I ever gave. Because I was so new. Yeah. I read the talking points and I was like, I'm never doing that again. But it was, and I had expressed this to Domingo Jerez, who had been a mentor of mine. He was the OCJS director in Ohio. He was the BJA director. And now he's, for a few more days, I think, at IACP. I hope that wasn't a secret.
Well, this won't come out for at least a few more days. So okay. You'll be good.
Okay, good. Love you, Domingo. So it was like, how do we get there? Now, the challenge is the tools you have, and the tools are the people, the practice, the experts out in the field, and the relationships. And that's where we had really fallen off, was the relationship building. And COVID, obviously, that's a part of that, right? I mean, I talked to the chief in Omaha, Nebraska, Chief Schmaderer, and he talked about all the work that they had done in driving violent crime down. And they continued to do all those things through COVID, except the community engagement pieces, and their crime went up. And so he was like, it's the community engagement piece. That is what in our jurisdiction, that's the thing that we were missing, and that was our secret sauce. So it was really about, how do we get to the point where violent crime is going down? What do we need to do to get there? Part of that, obviously, is understanding what's going on across the country. And obviously, there was something going on across the country, because it wasn't like it was just Washington, D.C. or Baltimore. It was everywhere.
That's right. Yeah. And, I think thinking back on that time, it was such a weird time, right? Coming off of COVID, everything was, police officers during COVID, the early days of the pandemic, they, and this, I know, but, not responding to every call,
Right.
taking calls over the phone and just losing that interaction with people. I think that's absolutely right. Where that's the big piece that was no longer in place was that, and part of that's officer retention too, right? And
Yes.
recruiting and all of those sorts of challenges. And I know that there were some initiatives for recruiting and retention under your watch as well. So I'm sort of wondering, as you think about accomplishments or maybe more initiatives that sort of you spearheaded or came out under your time there, what are some of those that stand out most to you?
I think there's a couple. One is I'm very proud of the focus and attention brought to officer safety and wellness. It needed to happen. And I think if you look into the future, agencies who are able to establish good practices, good policies, it is part of the onboarding, and it is part of whenever someone decides to leave, those agencies are going to be able to retain and recruit people better. People need to understand they're not widgets. They're not just something that's valued because of the thing they do for the organization, that they're people and that the organization wants to take care of them. And quite frankly, the public needs to want to take care of them as well, because an officer who is mentally sharp and feels physically safe is going to perform much better. One of the things that we did in Ohio, we created a standard called agency wellness. We initially had called it officer wellness. And the police officer, some of the leaders of the police officer organizations in Ohio, they came to me and they said, look, why don't we call it agency wellness? Because there's a lot of unsworn people who are in this with us, and they see all of the same things and they deal with all the same things. And I really respected that perspective. And I met a police officer, Don, great guy, who had dealt with a bad incident before, like maybe 20 years ago, bad incident, off duty too. Mm-hmm. Never really got that treated. Fast forward later on the job, terrible incident. And Don is devastated. And actually he spoke at that Officer Safety and Wellness Symposium in Atlanta. And, but he spoke to our advisory board in Ohio who created standards. It was the most, people were crying in this room, listening to this guy explain what he had gone through. And so I asked him specifically, I said, what was it like if I'm a member of the public and I approached you? He goes, I would have seen you as a threat. You were a threat to me. Yep. Everyone was a threat to me. And so I think people, I know there are challenges lots of times, and there are challenges in places, but I don't think the lack of investment is the way to address the challenge. I think we have to invest deeply in safety and wellness. And I think that's one of the most important things an organization can do. And I've sent countless people to Louisville, Kentucky. But if you've never been there, people should go and see what they did in that community with a group of incredibly young police leaders to really get people to invest in officer safety and wellness.
And shout out to Louisville, because they bring all their trainees, everybody in the academy, through the National Law Enforcement Museum here. Yeah, they take a field trip to Washington, D.C., and they hit up a few of the different museums, the African American History and Culture, the Holocaust Museum, and the National Law Enforcement Museum. So,
that's great. Probably, I will say this, though. If I have to pick one thing, I would say it was the violence reduction conference that we did in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because I felt like that was the culmination of everything we do. It was also kind of like a recognition of the interconnected nature of all of these tools. And maybe it's a way that people should think about grants a little bit different in the future, in terms of when I would go visit a community, they had a criminal justice problem, but they also had an infrastructure problem and healthcare challenges and education issues and transportation problems. And it was like they were all feeding each other. And so, maybe one day in the future, there'll be a way that like maybe a small number of communities, almost like a PSP for all things, right? Where you could get these challenges addressed through grant money and then access to experts. But that conference brought together so many people from across the country. It shared knowledge, and I think very often there are people who are so plugged in to everything that they have access to all of these tools. They know when the RFPs are coming out. They know the latest article that or the latest study that comes out that says, oh, that works or that doesn't work. And then there's a group of people who are doing the best they can with what they've got. And that was the inspiration for that conference. And I was incredibly proud. Great job by the team at BJA. And obviously, you can't talk about BJA without talking about the staff. It's just incredible people, so hardworking, so hardworking. There are some people like Melissa Nee worked for me for a little bit. I had to stop emailing her at night. I'd send people a message when I would think of something, and I'd think of something at 1:00 in the morning, and she'd reply at 1:01. And so there's a small group of people like, I'm not going to bother them, but it's an incredible staff of people.
No, you're absolutely right. The staff at BJA and throughout the DOJ, especially the funding components, but certainly in the other components as well. But having worked with a number of the funding components, the staff there that does the work to make sure that associations and agencies have what they need to carry out the mission. It really is incredible, and continues to be incredible. So definitely shout out. And I can't say I ever messaged Melissa at 1 a.m., but certainly she is one of those people that will get back to you as soon as
right away.
Yeah, right away.
I almost
definitely had that experience.
I almost get scared. Like I sent her a message not too long ago, and I didn't hear back from her for a few minutes. And I thought, man, I hope she's okay.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, good. Definitely good people.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Are you looking to expand your upcoming visit to Washington, D.C. this summer? Come visit the National Law Enforcement Museum located off the Red Line at Judiciary Square and explore more than 200 years of American law enforcement history. Now back to the show.
As I'm giving tours in the museum now to different groups and things, we come to our reel-to-reel exhibit where, we have TV and movie, props and things like that featuring law enforcement, and talk with people about what their favorite sort of quote unquote cop show and cop movie is. And I always share with my favorites, The Wire. And for the reason that you just shared, with the interconnectivity of how it's not just law enforcement that is, seemingly quote unquote sort of at fault for, different aspects of our societal challenges. It's the entire, systems that are set up in place. And I think that's what that show does so well, is it creates empathy and shares the blame also.
Yes,
to everyone.
That's a great pick too. The Wire is, that's one of my probably top 5 favorite shows of all time.
Yeah, definitely. It's It's my number one drama, I think.
Yeah.
So
Well, I won't quote the good senator, but
yeah.
he had a way of saying one word.
Yes, he did indeed. Well, and one other thing that I just want to point out too, from what you just were talking about. So unfortunately I wasn't in Indianapolis. I did hear great things about that event. I did have the pleasure of going to the Public Safety Partnership, a PSP, in Tulsa. And I thought that was a really great event. And one of the things that still stands out to me most is how the entire group of law enforcement and everybody that was there all took the tour of the Greenwood Center. And for those not familiar, it's the history of the Tulsa massacre, basically, and burning of Black Wall Street. And to see the reactions of law enforcement in those spaces is just, I always find that really fascinating because it really humanizes everyone. And that's one of the things that I always try to get across to people is understanding our shared humanity, right? In these different situations. And we all want the same things at the end of the day. And I think places like that really contextualize it. I was really, it was fantastic. We were able to do that at that event.
Yeah, Chief Franklin made it. I think every new recruit had to go through Greenwood Rising, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Yep.
Had to go there. And I remember talking to a police officer. He said he had lived his entire life in Tulsa. He had never heard anything about it. And, I consider myself a fairly educated person. I've always loved history. I didn't learn about it until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. It's a real shame that we don't know more. It's not taught more widely, but definitely that was an impactful BJA event. So
Definitely.
Just wanted to highlight that. One more question around federal service, and then we'll get into some of the work you're doing now. But I'm wondering, the federal service and leadership in a federal agency like BJA carries with it a lot of you have to be really nimble. There are a lot of different ways to go about conducting yourself as a leader. So what are one or two leadership lessons that you took away from your time as director at BJA?
Oh gosh.
If it's too difficult a question, you can just pick one.
I will say, and actually this will lead a little bit into how I ended up at Meadows. And that is, people need to hear that they're doing the work the right way. And hopefully you're able to say it because it's true. But people need to hear that. Yeah. And I think we take for granted at times the value in hearing from someone and hearing from the director. People would write talking points for me, right? And then sometimes, every once in a while, someone would do an incredible job. I'd send them a little note like, hey, those were great talking points, And they'd say, but you didn't really say the things that I said. I said it was in there. I mean, I didn't use the exact words, but the talking points were great. And I think that needs to be a part of leadership. The higher up you go in an organization, sometimes the less you hear about the job you're doing or not doing. But I do think being able to support people and tell them you did a great job on that is one of the things that I found very important to me in my career, to hear from people I respected. Hey, Karhlton, you did a nice job there.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, when you tell someone you're going to do something, if you tell someone you're going to be there for them, you have to do it. You have to do it. That, to me, when it comes to leadership, right? Leadership is about decision making, how you treat people, and there is a required level of professional integrity. And I remember telling I told, he's now my good friend Carlos out in New Mexico, that if he invited me to speak at this event, I would come speak. Now, I was in a really good mood when I said that. And then I'm looking at how much travel money I have left. But I told the man I would be there. So I went. I had an incredible time. Carlos is a great guy. That whole group is incredible. But I think that's one of the things and when you're supporting people, like, you have to be there. One of the most important things that you do, whether you're at BJA or OCJS or other organizations like that, there's such comfort in doing what people have always done. Mm-hmm. And when someone decides they're going to do something different, sometimes all they want is for someone to be there with them and be supportive. So I saw that as an important part of my role and of our role as people, where especially, that's why I would go to the PSP kickoff events, the Public Safety Partnership kickoff events, because I wanted people to know, like, I believe in this. I am here for you. This is incredibly important. You're not just a grant that we're giving out. So those are some of the things that I think about. And I think about it when I've been able to teach courses at Meadows and develop some courses at Meadows. And leadership is a big part of our focus, because leadership is what makes the world go round. You know, what was the name of it? There was a tool that we had at BJA. It was created before I got there, the Violent Crime Reduction Handbook or something like that. And it identified like eight or nine keys to reducing violent crime. But it was more like there were 8, and then there was 1. And the 1 was leadership, because that will decide how high. It's either going to limit your potential, or it's going to, make your potential boundless from leadership.
Absolutely. Well, and in law enforcement, it's particularly interesting around leadership, right? Because you can have a chief that buys in, to a particular program or something, but then how do they effectively communicate that down? And do they bring the sergeants and first line supervisors on board? And they're the ones that actually communicate down. So, and then creating that sort of that system of leadership throughout the entire organization, where even a patrol officer, and I say even in sort of quotes, but like a first year patrol officer shows up on the scene, they're a leader.
They are.
Developing that leadership, I think, goes a long way. And learning those leadership lessons early makes a big difference in how agencies are able to interact with the community and drive down violent crime and take care of their own officers and agency personnel. So I think that's
And that's actually one of the things that I really respected and love about Meadows is the focus on that first line supervisor. Mm-hmm. There are so many. I sat in so many meetings and tried to get people who do great leadership training, and say, what about the sergeants? What about the sergeants? What about the sergeants? And it's like, those are the chiefs of tomorrow, or those are the people who are going to get so fed up that they're going to be out, and you're going to lose a great And I couldn't get people, and they'd always say, "Oh, I hear you. I'm with you." I knew I knew a no was coming right after that. But so that's one thing I love about Meadows and it's at the Carruth Police Institute. We call CPI. Mm-hmm. It is that we are focused on all levels of leadership, and we give those sergeants or people who want to be sergeants, we give them those leadership skills that they need. And so I wish more places would. I know there are other projects going on right now that are focused on better understanding first line supervisors, but that's definitely one of the things that got me really interested in Meadows.
Can you tell us a little bit about Meadows, actually, for anybody that's not or not really understanding of what you all do? I know Meadows is known for, really reframing, public safety through a mental health lens and, officer safety and wellness and these things that we've talked about so far, even from your time at BJA. But I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit more about Meadows and, how you see the approach that Meadows takes really changing traditional public safety systems.
Yeah. So, gosh, there's a lot I want to say about Meadows.
It's a long question.
It is, but there's a lot I want to say. Let me start with kind of even how I ended up there. And I think I kind of teased this a little bit earlier. So my boss, BJ Wagner, so all the different sections in Meadows have an executive vice president who oversees the section. So we're the health and public safety team, and we operate in that intersection that you just talked about. So BJ came to OJP, and she gave, we're having I don't know if you were there for this or not, but it was on 988. And so BJ was there, and she gave a presentation. She did a very nice job. Mm-hmm. The thing I liked about it is that it was like, it's how I hope I come across, like technically sound, but very relatable. Mm. And that's how she came across. And I was like, that's good. I'm watching that. I was like, that was good.
Yeah.
So I sent her a message on LinkedIn. I said, yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation. So she sends me a message back, and she's like, hey, I'm going to be in DC. Would you like to get together and talk? So we get together, and I'm so focused on BJA stuff. And she's kind of like, probably maybe the second or third time that we got together, she was like, you ever thought about coming to Meadows? You ever thought about becoming a consultant? And, I'm like totally blown away by this, because I'm thinking about, I've got this I've got to get done, and this I've got to get done, whatever. And so, but she is she's very persuasive. And she was very focused on, she's like, and she talked to me about Meadows. And, it is located in Texas. It's kind of started as a small organization with 10 or so people. It's grown to somewhere between 150, 200 people. The rest of the Institute is very much focused on mental health. Our team, like I said, and we have a team of about, I think we're 10 right now, and incredible professionals, incredible, hardworking, smart. Like, I would, if you told me I could pick up that team and create another division at BJA, I would do that in a heartbeat, because of how hardworking, how smart, and how devoted these folks are. And so you can't help but enjoy working with people like that. And my buddy Chris Fisher, who I worked with at OJP, mm-hmm. he and I are both senior vice presidents in our HPS section. And so we operate in that space where, I hate to even call it the intersection. It should be more like overlapping circles. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit that's not behavioral health, because it impacts so much of what we do. And so one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is response. And that is getting the scene right from the moment the call taker takes a call. So we work with telecommunicators, dispatch centers. Actually, the very first project I ever worked on at Meadows was in Pflugerville, Texas. And that's what we were doing, helping them better identify underlying behavioral health calls. And I always think of it like this. You take a flight, right? You take a flight and you get up and you go through some turbulence, and then the pilot comes on and they'll say like, oh, we're dealing with a little bit of turbulence. You're like, yeah, we all know this, sir. We're all here.
Yeah.
Right? Why don't you pay attention up there? And or the pilot who tells you when you're on the ground, hey, when we get up, we're going to go through a pocket. It's going to be probably about 10 minutes. I'm going to try to get us around it, but there's a chance that we'll go through it. That person has just built expectations and set the scene. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do through some of these projects that we have is help the dispatcher set the scene so they can give the right information to the police officer. So when they go there, it's not a surprise. And they have an understanding of exactly what they're dealing with. And the outcomes when the situation is like that is so much better than it is if the officer shows up and all of a sudden they see a person with a knife acting erratically. And we actually have a course, one of the courses that we have developed. I didn't develop it. I'd love to say I developed it, but I did not develop it. It's called Respond. And that is what its focus is. It is preparing that dispatcher to be able to better tease out information and then to use that information to set the scene for the officer and then for the officer to be able to have a better outcome, a safer outcome for themselves, for whoever they've been called to deal with, and also for the family members who call, because obviously we've seen some incredibly sad situations where a parent has a kid who has who's dealing with behavioral health problems. The police are called, something goes terribly wrong, and then the parent blames themselves forever. So those are the types of things that we try to avoid. And training is one of those things. Unfortunately, like when budgets get tight, It's one of the first things to go. But it is everything an organization does is built on training. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really proud of our trainings. We have great instructors. We develop evidence-based curriculum. Actually, one of the things that we develop right now, we have an executive leadership training that we're doing. It's for, chiefs, command level staff. And this is a little nerve-wracking piece of it, right? So it's been developed. Now it's being peer-reviewed by actual chiefs. Mm-hmm. We actually use real chiefs. And they're reviewing it right now. And one chief was so excited about it. He called me, and he was like, "Man, this is great. This is great." I was like, oh, thank God that's how he feels. Yeah. He was like, "There's a little thing I'm going to make some concept." That's fine. Yeah. That is fine. That's why we want you to have it. But that's the care that we take. And the person who developed the training, it's like her passion. Like she wanted this training from the day she started at Meadows. She was talking about, I want to do a training on executive leadership. Mm-hmm. And so we'll have that course out pretty soon.
That's amazing. Well, and I love the fact that one of the focuses on communications and yes. dispatch. I mean, so overlooked, in the world of training, and they really are. They're the entry point, right, for anybody coming into the system. I mean, we like to think it's an officer, responding to the call, but it's not. It's the call taker. It's the person on the other end of that call, and that can make or break, whatever that response looks like. And so I love the fact that that's one of the areas of focus, and certainly executive leadership and supervisory levels as well. But yeah, communication's huge.
It is. It's really important. And so even in our leadership courses, in all of our leadership courses, we go over, it's called communication styles, and we go over the style of communication that people utilize. And it's funny, like, I'm sure you've had this experience where you're sitting in a meeting and someone is relaying information. You walk out of the meeting, you talk to a person who is in the meeting with you. Their take is so completely different from yours. You're almost wondering, are they punking me? Like, were they in the same meeting?
Yeah.
So, communication starts like with listening, which I think sometimes is the most underrated aspect of communication. But the way we communicate with people, like I try to tell people, if you get a yes or no question and it's complicated, you might want to just say yes. But here, because people need to hear an actual answer to your question. There's a great comedian who does this whole story about how he's asking his wife questions and they are not on the same page. They are not on the same page at all. But I teach my wife about that sometimes. You can cut this part out. But communication it's so key and so important. And that's why we teach it. Communication, decision-making, health and safety, health and wellness, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence. I think this is an area where we need to see significant investments, because like some of us can make the best decisions in the world when everything is like perfect, right? Like I grew up, I was a big Troy Aikman fan. And I watched Troy Aikman throw a football in perfect weather, and he was incredible. And then I watched Troy Aikman throw a wet football, and I thought, how did he make it to the NFL? And he talked about the fact that he could not throw a wet football. Well, decision-making is kind of the same way, right? People are one way when everything's perfect. But then when things get emotional, how do you recognize that in yourself? How do you recognize it in others?
Yeah.
And that's so that's another thing that we teach in our leadership courses. The other thing I do want to mention this, because this is probably, because I talk to police leaders all the time. Like I did a tour of North Texas when I got to Meadows. And I can't believe how big the cities in Texas are.
It's really
there are so many big cities. But when I sit down and I talk to chiefs, every single one of them, when I say we do civilian training, I always personally refer to it as professional staff training. But in their eyes are like, oh, you do civilian training? Like, yeah, we do civilian leadership training. We'll train your people. You can host a training at your agency, and we'll come there and train your folks, because there is an absence. There's not enough leadership training just for regular people trying to do their job. And they're in positions of leadership. And at any one moment, they are the leader to the public. They can be the leader. They're the forward-facing person who the public's interacting with, and that interaction is going to shape the perception that person has of whatever organization they're a part of forever. So, and that's one of the things that we're doing around the country. This has been great because we've done work. We've trained people from Denver. We had a group from Denver come to Texas to get trained. Sacramento sent people to come get trained. I'm bugging some people in this neck of the woods to come get trained, and certainly bothering folks in Ohio. But that civilian leadership training, and just training in particular, is so important and so needed and so necessary, because people need to make, no matter what job they're in, they need to be able to make good decisions. They need to be able to take care of themselves. They need to be able to deal with stress. They need to make ethical decisions, and they have to have emotional intelligence. And so it doesn't matter if you're sworn or not; those are skills that you still need.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting. Talking about emotional intelligence too. For example, I think there's not enough emphasis placed on it. To your point, I think, emotional intelligence is one of those things that we like to think in law enforcement that we're very logical. If this, then that, then, we can figure it all out. We have a problem. We have a solution to every problem and all of these things. But so much of what we deal with in law enforcement on a regular basis has to do with people's emotions.
Right.
I mean, you respond to a call for service, and generally speaking, somebody's emotions are involved. And that's not a criticism of them. They're going through, something potentially very life altering at a high level. but it's just the reality. And I like to think of it as, one of the things I'm doing coming up at the Conference on Crimes Against Women is training agencies on how to create a trauma-informed agency, right? And it sort of goes back to that emotional intelligence, understanding, people's emotions, the trauma that everybody could be experiencing in different situations, and not just focusing on the sworn law enforcement officer, but
Definitely.
everybody in the agency, because so many, to your point, people in an agency are not sworn officers. You have dispatchers, communications officers, you have, crime scene techs, you have all of these people. And then that's nothing to say of the administrative staff that take
Right.
care of, the day-to-day operations, really, so I love to hear that you're really focused on those types of positions. That's fantastic.
I had a boss, John Bourne. He was the colonel of the State Highway Patrol, the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and then became the director of the Department of Public Safety. And he would always say, he wouldn't use the word emotional intelligence. He wouldn't use words like de-escalation. Mm-hmm. He would just say, in policing, in law enforcement, you need to be the best part of the worst day of someone's life.
Absolutely.
And that has stuck with me. I haven't worked with John in years, but that has stuck with me. And it's so true.
I love
it's
that.
So true.
Yeah, that's amazing. I might steal that. Moving forward a little bit, you talked about some of the things that you currently have going on at Meadows, which are fantastic. Where do you think, the next 5 to 10 years, takes you in this position, and what sort of strategies in public safety, new and developing sort of strategies, do you see Meadows being involved in? And maybe even if it's not Meadows specifically, if there are things on the burner that you can talk about, but just in general, even.
Well, I think the general thing, and I know that we will at Meadows, and that is just getting better and better at problem identification and building the right response. And, you can look across the country. There's purely civilian responses in places. There's co-response. You have quick response teams that deal with overdoses and things like that. I think the future is about creating better response, and really, as this field, as it has grown, it's gotten better, and it's just going to continue to get better. But the big thing is once the front end gets better, and once police gets better, and the partners get better, and the dispatchers get better, and that initial response gets better, and those things are getting better every day across the country. Those things are getting better. And then the handoff happens. That's where I think in the future we have to get better. And we've got to get even closer to the health field. Mm-hmm. And, there's so much that we try to even deflect people from coming into the criminal justice system. Because once you're in that system, there's things that just happen. And you can have outcomes that are great for people who, there's the drug court alumni organization. I'm pretty tight with those folks, and they talk about how it turned their life around, right? That's not the result for most people who enter into criminal justice, right? Yeah. A lot of it is just kicking the can down the road. And we all read about people who've been arrested 100 times, 120 times. I think as that response gets better all across that kind of criminal justice continuum, the next part is being able to get those folks directed to the place they need, so they don't have to deal with policing anymore. And the other piece, I think, is some more growth and prevention that we'll never even see in the criminal justice system, because behavioral health will be better, the healthcare field will be better, substance use disorder treatment will be better, and those systems will be taking care of those folks and getting better outcomes, so they don't end up in the criminal justice system that has changed dramatically in order to address the people who are coming through their doors. And I hope that's what things look like. Now there's a lot of other things that aren't really related to that in terms of violence and things like that I think we can become much better at. I think we can train people better, have more of a focus on training. We can train communities better. We can, you brought up trauma, better identification of trauma early. You can see the signs of trauma. I mean, I was talking to Jessica Nichols, and she told me, like, she did ACEs when she, like, as an adult, she did an ACEs test, and she was like, I had every single one of them except for one when I was like 10 years old, right? So I think the future is we've got to get to things earlier, and then other systems have to be both funded and equipped to do the job, which is to provide care to what is a healthcare problem. And I hope that's what the future looks like.
It's creating public safety approach, basically, almost to criminal justice. And I say that, not to say that, in place of, right? It's but it's all those things you just talked about. It's those early intervention pieces that will end up making the job easier for law enforcement down the road. And I think we need to, if we, to your point, understand how those relationships work and build off those relationships. I mean, I learned so much. So my wife got her master's in public health and violence prevention from Hopkins, and works for PERF. And
never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a small school. It's a niche school. But she in explaining the public safety, our public health approach to violence interruption and things like this, it really opened my eyes in a lot of different ways. And, I give her all the credit in the world for that. And sometimes it was things that I understood, but just didn't understand, at the end of the day. But I think that the more and more I see and hear and talk to people, like yourself, that to me is like, there needs to be a shift, right? And we need to not look at, on the law enforcement side, we need to not look at that as encroaching on our work or taking anything away from us. We should all be working together because we all want the same things at the end of the day.
Absolutely. One thing I would love to do, and I'd love to get a big grant
if anybody's listening
to do this, and that is to really go back and look at what happened in that last quarter of 2022. Where slowly you could start to see the dam break. And then 2023, you see the biggest reduction in homicides in our country's history. In 2024, another drop. In 2025, another drop. And this is really the time where we really need to be taking stock of, this is what people did, and this is why. This is what drove crime down. And I know there's a lot of good people who worked like crazy who would love to tell the story about how they did it in their particular jurisdiction. And so I think this is one of the things that we would be well served, because there will come a time, because there always is. We saw this in the early 2000s when crime ticked up and then it went back down. We saw it again in like 2015, 2016, it went up and then it went back down. And then we saw the huge increase in 2020, 2021, and into 2022. And now it's going down, dramatically going down. And so we really need to take stock of that so that when that time comes again, we can pull out the playbook and the lessons learned and say, hey, this is what we did in the early 90s. This is what we did in the early 2000s. And this is what we started doing in 2022, even into 2021, that helped drive crime down.
Yeah. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
If you know anybody that's all right, last question. I want to be respectful of your time. I really do, again, appreciate you coming on. So for leaders and practitioners that are working right now, on the ground doing the work, they're navigating a lot of really complex systems, in various different ways. What advice would you offer to those folks?
Oh, gosh. Now, that's actually a tough question because, thinking about like where you may sit, one thing that I try to do, and actually is very much encouraged, like our boss will tell us, put time on your schedule to read, to read about things. And, we should always be in the practice of getting better and knowing more and understanding more. And so one thing I would say to a person is, and I just had a person do this with me, reach out to people. Mm-hmm. Reach out to some of the people who feel like, oh, that person would never want to talk to me. They'd love to talk to you because someone at some point, they were that person trying to navigate through all of that. Yep. And someone talked to them, right? I had great mentors. My entire career. Tom Stickrath to this day is, if I had a real problem, I would reach out to Tom, and he'd text me back just like that, as long as he's
like Melissa.
Yeah, as long as he's not on a book tour. But he would text me back right away. And people like, there was a judge, he's a judge now, Bill Klatt. There's another person who was a great mentor of mine. Amy Solomon, I consider a mentor, a person I learned a lot about, a lot from. But I would say, reaching out to people, for one thing, I think there's such great value in understanding you're not alone. Sometimes we feel like our problems are so unique. It's like when you talk to a city and they talk about how, well, that won't work here because our violence is different. And like, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Right.
Might be different from the small city that you neighbor, but there's lots of cities in the country with the exact crime problem you have. But these problems, so if you're part of a stakeholder organization, lean on those folks. If there's, someone you respect who's in your field, if there's someone who had the job before you, reach out to those folks. Sometimes it seems like counterintuitive to talk to your staff, because I think a lot of leaders they feel I need to take all this on myself. But lots of times the staff have been around for, the leaders come and go, right? So that would be the kind of professional advice I would give them. The other thing is, you can't have every moment of it's not healthy for your brain. And, one of the things that I've learned, I went to this brain health conference seminar in Texas recently. I think we're going to start to offer some courses on brain health. But it's not good for your brain to always be focused on a task. Sometimes, find something that you like to do. The weather's been nice in Ohio. course, once baseball season started, it went from 80 degrees to 40 degrees.
Naturally.
Right. But I used to take like an hour walk every day. And I started on my lunch break, because, when you work remotely, you don't think about things like that. Like, oh, I should take a lunch break. It's like, oh, no, I'm going to work all day.
Right.
I'm going to work all day. And then I'm going to work, then I'm just sitting around doing nothing. I'm going to work at night too. And so I get up, I take a walk, and I do some of my best thinking just alone with just my thoughts, just walking. And so that's the advice I would give a person. Someone can help them.
Yeah.
Someone can, and they don't have to do it by themselves, and they do need to take care of themselves. And it's a lot easier to go on some of these journeys with other people. I used to share this this African proverb sometimes when I'd give a speech. And it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And some of these things that we try to take on ourselves are really better. We get much better outcomes when we do them together.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end this conversation. I really thank you for that. Incredible advice, Director. And thank you so much for being here. This has been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate it. Your reflections on leadership, impact, and the future of public safety really speak to the moment we're in and where we need to go next. Thank you for your service and your commitment to innovation, and for joining us here on Precinct 444. And to our listeners, thanks for spending time with us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your colleagues, and join us next time for another conversation at the intersection of leadership, policy, and public safety.
We would love to hear from you.
Until then,
send in your questions, comments, and feedback to Precinct 444 at nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the Precinct.